Sandy, welcome. It's an absolute joy to have you all with us remotely. You don't need me to tell you, this is an incredibly challenging time for one and all. One of the things that we are certainly learning about is how important community is at this time for each and every one of you. And we are very fortunate to have built this global community. And really, we want to make the best use of that community now to share with you our fact-based insights from our members and from our global diaspora. This week, we are delighted to have SBN Ambassador Sandy Donaldson join us, and we'll hear more details and insight from Sandy in a few moments. So without further ado, welcome Sandy. Delighted to have you with us. Obviously, we were planning on introducing you in a slightly different and grander surroundings of New York at this time. I think was it Saturday was the big event for Tartan Parade. Obvious to say why that's not happening. So Sandy, welcome, and please take the time to introduce yourself to our global community.
Yes, hello there. Thanks, Christine, and thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to meet, I'd say, quite a few of the members of Scottish Business Network. So my name is Sandy Donaldson, and I'm from Glasgow originally, the south side of Glasgow. And I went to Glasgow Caledonian University, and I studied business and languages. And then after that, I moved off to work for an American manufacturing company. And I spent a bit of time working for them on Six Sigma projects around Europe and to the US. And then I went to work in medical devices with one of their particular divisions. So very interesting work working on bringing medical devices to patients with a focus on surgical care. And then around 2008, I joined UCB. And UCB is a Belgian pharmaceutical company. That's who I work with today. And I've taken various roles with them. And currently I'm responsible for their global digital marketing, their multi-channel marketing. And this gives an opportunity for UCB to explain its solutions and its services and its products to physicians around the world. So that's just a little bit about me and what I do. When it comes to my interaction with Scottish Business Network, I first heard and was introduced to Christine and Russell Dalgleish earlier last year, and I kind of fell in love with the concept because having been a Scot or traveling the world for the last 15, 20 years, I always was looking for ways to give back. And I've been members of Global Scot in the past, but I didn't find the right balance and opportunity to be able to support growing Scottish companies. So when I had the opportunity to work with Christine and Russell, I jumped at the chance because I think it's a fantastic organisation.
Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that feedback. We're absolutely delighted to have you as one of our 2 ambassadors at the moment in the USA. Sandy, I know that you're at home at the moment in Atlanta, but if you were to look out the window now in the business district in Atlanta, what would you see outside that window at the moment? How's it looking?
It's an excellent question because when you actually look outside, Christine, you see very little activity. So if you actually go to downtown Atlanta, there obviously is nobody there, similar to many cities around the world these days. But activity is still continuing, actually. There's quite a lot of activity. And I think the key message I have right now is that America is still open. I think there's lots of opportunities and businesses continuing as normal to a degree. There are certain things happening outside when you look into the city which are probably not very positive, which is homelessness. You know, the only people that actually are in the cities these days are homeless people, because in American cities there aren't too many residents per se. But there is a challenge, I think, with how do you cater and support the homeless people who normally would rely on support from people that were going to work and commuting and providing them with food and necessities. That now, unfortunately, has dried up. But business is continuing.
What advice, I mean, I appreciate there's the local advice and the federal state system, that what's being told locally to you in Atlanta and what's being told locally, nationally to businesses. What is the advice you're being given as a business?
It's a great question, and actually it's very important to look at some of the differences between how Europe is structured and the US. Because in the UK particularly, you have a lot of very different organizations that provide support. You have SBN, you have the government, and then you even have various regional trade bodies. That support model does not exist to the same depth in the US. So there's a much higher reliance on the federal government. That's why it was announced this $2.2 trillion stimulus package will be the vast majority of the economic development in the US. And there is an excellent resource that Scott Dalgleish will post, or it will be included in the meeting notes, which I would recommend people to have a look at if you do have business interests in the US, because it's a calculator that can help you to understand what would be the potential economic support that you could receive from this stimulus package. But there isn't too much happening, Christine, on a state level. It really is concentrated to this federal loan, but it's very generous. You know, on top of the $2.2 trillion, the vast majority of it will be loans that will be forgiven. So it really is a pure stimulus package.
Forgive me, Sandy, and it could be just me who's picked that up correctly. You advise Scottish companies who have businesses in the USA. Was that what you were advising? So if you're a Scottish company with a USA business, look at this detail that we can share around support from right.
Yes. And the interpretation is, because this is all relatively new, the interpretation is quite open. So even if you were thinking of launching something in the US, there is an opportunity, I believe, to actually access some of the loans. I think you need to at least have had an LLC as a footprint in advance of this. But again, I would encourage people, and I would encourage SBN members to check this, because this might now be the time to actually say, I'm going to push for a US expansion.
Yeah. So what is the USA saying as regards global trade and movement? Has there been restrictions on movement of products and supplies into and around the USA?
It's a great question again. And what you see, Christine, is there's a difference between the government's, I would say, announcements and what actually is happening. So clearly they've said is that trade will not be restricted. I think one of the challenges you see is that air freight is being restricted purely because of the cost of doing business for some of these airlines. So there are slowdowns in air freight. There are slowdowns in shipping in sea freight, even though the government is saying that we still are open for trade. But again, I would not in any way recommend or suggest that trade has stopped. I am more than happy to go into some of the details, but I think there's actually many opportunities now. But you do need to bear in mind is that there is a slowdown in the delivery of goods and of goods.
One of the insights that we got when we spoke with Tom in Beijing last week, and he talked around a very clear time scale, with week one being 23rd of January, the Chinese New Year, and he has counted everything, as has anyone in China counted everything from that date forward. I think in the UK we're probably feeling we're now in week two with the controls that were put in place last Monday. Where would the USA say they are as regards the situation, regards close down or lockdown with the COVID-19 pandemic? Are you at point zero? Are you not even there yet?
So no, we're at week 3. So
right.
This is now the 3rd week that the vast majority of organizations in the US really applied a very tight control. And I think similar to many of the other countries, we don't know where it's going to end. So I think that there are 3 very important milestones that need to be considered. Number 1 is, where are you, or when does things actually start? When does that very serious, I would say, approach to COVID-19 start? The second is that estimation point as to where it will end. And right now that varies greatly, and everyone's trying to understand that. And it ranges, certainly in the discussions I'm having with medical professionals because of my role. The estimation is somewhere between the end of April and the mid of July. But the most important one, I think, Christine, is at what point do we assume the new normal kicks in and business changes? And certainly in the pharma world, I'm aware that there are some large pharma companies have now turned around, and because of all the sales reps we have, they've stopped their sales reps seeing doctors, and they've actually identified a date for the new normal, which is the 1st of January 2021. So some pharma companies have made a commitment that they're not going to send back in sales reps to see physicians until next year. So those are the 3 dates which I think are key. And I think that latter one is also very important for SBN members to think about, which is the new normal. What is that going to look like? How can we prepare for that? And when do we think that we can start to get solutions ready for it?
You're giving great advice to our members and looking at this market. What would your advice be to our members who have relationships with individuals, be they agents, distributors, or just good business relationships in the USA? What advice would you be giving our business leaders during this time around ensuring that relationship continues?
Well, I don't think there should be any hindrance to that relationship whatsoever. I mean, we live in a flat world now with digital, and there's every opportunity to connect. So I think the connection has always been here. This ability for us to now talk on Zoom or various other platforms, I think the key differentiator, and what I would be encouraging the SBN members and all Scottish companies to do, is to ensure that their mindset is still very positive, and to encourage those agents and those connections and those distributors in the US to remain positive. Because I don't see this, and of course we have to be very careful of the nuances here, because coronavirus is tragic, but it's also going to be one of the most disruptive forces that we will ever see in our lifetime. And there are opportunities. Again, we need to be careful that we're not exploiting, and we need to be careful that we're not seen to be opportunistic to a degree. But I actually think that there's massive opportunities right now for companies to focus on disruptive innovation and potentially pivot. And I can give an example, Christine.
Please.
In Atlanta, we have Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is one of the world's best engineering universities. Excuse me. They have an incubator called ATDC, and they've got over 200 companies there. And I support them mentoring a few of these companies. And quite a few of the companies are now pivoting. They're taking away what was their original modus operandi and what they were trying to do as a startup, and they're now pivoting it to the new normal. One example is a nice company called Remedy. Remedy used to focus on creating software that would support cancer diagnosis boards. They've now, in the last 2 weeks, pivoted and created a triage software for COVID-19. So I think that with the right mindset, with the right mentality, and being open, I think that there's fantastic opportunities for any company, as well as SBN members, to brainstorm and think about, how can I do something differently to support solutions around COVID-19 and to get ready for what is going to be the new normal from Q3 onwards.
And where would you advise companies to look for? I stress the point again, fact-based insights, and you've given a couple of comments there around it. Where else would you be directing our members at the moment around continuous intelligence gathering at this time?
That's a good question, and it's not an easy one to answer because it's virtually everywhere. I mean, we get traditional market research and competitive intelligence from the companies that we source as a pharmaceutical company. But I would encourage members to look as broad as they can, because this new normal, there's very few areas it will not touch. Travel, how we connect, healthcare. I mean, even some of the, the financial models the basic premise of capitalism are being questioned as well to a degree. Case in point being that a lot of companies, the shareholders wanted their companies to keep very little cash on the books, and now they're complaining that there's no cash on the books. So I think that it's very broad, Christine, in terms of where the new normal will affect. But I would encourage people to just continue reading and looking at various sources. I definitely would follow some of the more innovative companies, so the Googles of the world, the Facebooks. And I also see that quite a few of the strategy consultants, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, they actually are creating a lot of white papers on what the new normal may look like for certain industries. So there would be a good place to look for some very specific insights.
Good. And Sandy, I talk about eyes and ears on the ground, and you're our eyes and ears on the ground there. We don't want to flood you even more so during this time. You've got another day job and a family to take care of at this time. Within this new normal, what support can you offer to our SBN members and their businesses at this time, Sandy?
So what I can offer is I'm more than happy for any SBN member to jump on a call and to brainstorm with you on your business and what that potential pivot or how your current products and services could be adopted within the US. So that's number one, more than happy to work with you on this. And then number two is, having been in the US, I have a fairly, I would say, deep network. So if you would like to connect, I'm more than happy to kind of curate a kind of package to say, here are some of the people that might be interesting for you to connect with. And what I would encourage SBN members to think about, Christine, is I don't know every single member in terms of who you are and what you do, but there are very few SBN members that cannot export tomorrow. There are very few SBN members that do not have a very strong value proposition. So the world is flat, and I would encourage all of the SBN members to think about how can I take my existing solution and already connect it with new geographies. And myself, and I hope I'm not speaking on behalf of Fraser, but the US ambassadors would be very happy to connect and to help create some tailored packages.
Great stuff. Thank you, Sandy. I've not got any questions coming in, and I'm looking online. I don't see anything coming through. If anybody has a question that they want to raise directly with Sandy, or if there's anything you felt I've not covered in this, please drop me a line or WhatsApp me. For those, hopefully all of you have my number. Sandy, this is what is it that attracted you to live and work in the US of A? I just have to ask that from a personal perspective. What is it about the USA that appeals to you and continues to appeal?
So it's the culture. It's the entrepreneurial culture. And actually you see that now evident more than ever with this situation. So I think there's some big differences. And if you look in Europe, when you ask, if you take a room of entrepreneurs or business people and you ask them to say, do you think you're on top of your game? Are you good at what you do? Surprisingly, most Europeans will turn around and say, yeah, I'm pretty confident that I have a level of mastery of what I do. Interestingly, you'd imagine Americans to be quite gung-ho about that. But when you ask that same question, they're always a little bit sure, and they always think there's somebody out there who's doing it better. That gives them a lot of drive. So they're always looking to how they can improve themselves. And I think that the model where they can come together and innovate and solve to create specific problems is deeply ingrained into the culture and the model of the US. And I like that very much. So I don't see too many people out there complaining that I've lost my job. So they actually have now a term called a coronapreneur. And these are people which are now starting their own businesses and making, when you get lemonades, make lemonade, lemons make lemonade.
Yeah.
An example of that locally is that, I see quite a few people which were chefs and they've now become unemployed. They've now gone to various social media groups and started to offer their services to cook and to deliver to your house direct. So again, I think you're seeing that entrepreneurialism, you're seeing that disruptive innovation, and you're seeing that this will probably be a new thing in the future, is more people will not go to restaurants, but just happy to have restaurant food delivered to them.
Yeah.
So that's, Christine, what really attracted me to the US, is this entrepreneurial culture.
Good. Well, questions coming in now. And one point, thank you, Anna. We do have what's called the sidebar chat, so that might be useful for people if they want to send me a question directly or just have a chat online during this. Question from Adam Hunter, who we're going to hear from shortly. So his question is around your business and UCB. How are they pivoting in this new norm, Sandy? How's your business changing?
I actually think it's fantastic, because it's helping us to add transparency to problems that we thought were there and needed to be addressed. So I'm going to answer Adam's question, but just to give a bit of background information, there are 81,000 pharmaceutical sales reps in the US. 81,000. So that's one sales rep per 10 physicians, because there's 830,000 physicians in the US. That's $20 billion of costs per year. Now, if you ask most physicians in America, most doctors, none of them particularly see the value proposition of having so many reps. So what I think this situation is doing is it's accelerating solutions, because all of those 81,000 reps are currently sitting at home. None of them are allowed to see physicians anymore. They're not allowed to go into hospitals, and they're not allowed to go into practices. So what it's doing is it's accelerating what the future model will look like. Quite a few of these pharmaceutical companies are now starting to say, we're definitely not going to have as many reps for the new normal, and we're going to change a little bit the channels that we use, and also the messaging will be less promotional, but more about how can we help you, how can we support you. So to answer Adam's question, the way that we are pivoting is that we are now really accelerating the view on how can we really add support, and we're changing that interaction model that we have with our customers. And I think this is something which is going to be a fundamental change across many industries, is the engagement model. How will that change now with the new normal?
And a supplementary question to that is, within this new model that UCB are developing, what are their thoughts on ensuring the supply chain within UCB, and particularly around the just-in-time medicine delivery?
Well, from a supply chain point of view, and again, I can only speak really for the realm that I'm focused on, which is digital marketing, but my understanding is that we actually have a very good supply chain and we have stockages. I think that the question mark may well be, once it leaves UCB and it's then into the distribution network, there might be a few more question marks, but I don't have enough data there, Christine, to be able to say whether that is or that's not a problem. Certainly from what I see from my own personal experiences is that there isn't an issue in getting access to most medicines.
Well, thank you for that, Sandy. I've got no further questions coming in. Oh, hold on, I do. Thank you, Rebecca. You mentioned travel, asked about continuous intelligence gathering. What do you think, Sandy, travel will look like in the new normal?
Yeah, so it will change, and I think it's important to look at the why that will change. Now, here we are all sitting at home, and some people might be going stir crazy, but actually quite a few people that were road warriors that used to travel and have to get up at 4 a.m. to get a 6 a.m. flight, I think quite a few people are now realizing that, wait a minute, my quality of life with reduced travel can increase. So I think that there will be quite a few people that might be a little bit more resistant to travel. I think you see advances in technology and people becoming more accustomed to Zoom and to Whereby and to Skype. So the embracing of the digital platforms, I think, will help. And I think the other criteria which is driving this is the cost. You know, quite a few companies are actually benefiting from the reduced travel. certainly my company spent millions of dollars and pounds and euros every year on travel. We now have massive savings, and similar to many large corporations, we're now wondering, what do we do with that money? Do we redeploy that as to give back to the community for COVID-19, or does that become a saving? So I think that you'll see travel budgets being reduced as well. But I think travel will pick up. There probably will be a spike as we try to act as a catalyst to get the economy up and running. But I think it will take a long time to go back to the levels that we were seeing, earlier this year and at the end of last year.
Thank you for that, much appreciated. And I see some thanks coming in from those listening in. Sandy is available to connect in with either through LinkedIn, or we're happy to make that introduction. But as we've said, Sandy, you're our eyes and ears on the ground there, and we will definitely come back to you over the coming weeks to get further insights to what's happening in Atlanta. But delighted to welcome you on board. Thank you.